Before we begin, I'd love to know, what city are you watching us from today? And if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. It truly helps more than you know. Now, let me tell you what happened. I'm a woman in my early 50s, old enough to believe I've already been surprised by life in every possible way. That's probably why I wasn't prepared for that afternoon, or for him. My sister's son, Daniel, was no longer the boy who used to trail behind me at family barbecues, asking me to push him higher on the swing. He was 30 now, tall, quiet, thoughtful, a man who had lived enough to carry his own questions. I was staying at my sister's house in a small town outside of Columbus, the kind of place where evenings stretch long and cicadas hum like background music. The house smelled faintly of brewed coffee and old books, and the late summer light poured through the kitchen window, turning dust motes into tiny floating stars. My sister had gone out to run errands, leaving Daniel and me alone at the table, two adults pretending we weren't slightly unsure of how to talk to each other yet. We made polite conversation at first. Work, weather, the usual safe territory. He sat across from me, fingers wrapped around his mug, eyes focused but distant, like something was forming behind them. I remember thinking how much he looked like his father in that moment, and how time had quietly rearranged our roles without asking permission. Then he cleared his throat. "Aunt Claire," he said, his voice steady but careful, "can I ask you something kind of personal?" There it was, that subtle shift in the air. I felt it before I answered. I nodded, unsure why my chest suddenly felt tight. "Of course," I said. "You can ask me anything." He hesitated, then looked directly at me. "Do you ever regret the life you chose?" The question landed harder than I expected, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was honest, raw, and because no one had asked me that so directly before, not even myself, at least not out loud. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the clock tick on the wall. I saw my reflection in the dark window behind him, a woman with lines earned through laughter and loss, someone who had loved deeply and also walked away when love wasn't enough. "I think about it," I said slowly, "more than I admit." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "I'm trying to figure out if it's okay to want something different from what everyone expects." That was when I realized this wasn't just a question. It was an invitation to be real, to be human together across generations with mutual respect and no assumptions. I didn't expect that conversation to open a door inside me. I didn't expect how deeply seen I would feel, and I definitely didn't expect how much I would learn about myself before the sun went down. But that was only the beginning. After his question hung between us, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Outside, a lawnmower droned somewhere down the street, then faded. Daniel rubbed his thumb along the rim of his mug, a small nervous habit I suddenly remembered from when he was a teenager. "I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads," he continued. "Everyone keeps telling me I should be grateful. Good job, stable life. But some days I wake up and wonder if this is all there is." I nodded, not because I had the perfect answer, but because I recognized the feeling. "When I was your age," I said, "I thought certainty would come with time, like wrinkles or gray hair. It doesn't. What comes instead is learning how to sit with the questions." He smiled faintly. "You always sounded like you had things figured out." That made me laugh, a real laugh that surprised both of us. "Oh, Daniel, I just learned how to hide the confusion better." We talked for a long while after that, about his fear of disappointing his parents, about my choice not to remarry after my divorce, and how people still treat that like an unfinished sentence. The kitchen grew warmer as the sun shifted, light sliding across the table until it touched his hands. There was nothing improper in the way we spoke, just an honesty that felt rare and unexpectedly intimate. At one point he asked, "Do you think it's ever too late to start over?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a swell of emotion I hadn't anticipated. "No," I said, "but I do think it gets braver every year you wait." Something softened in his expression. Respect, maybe, or relief. In that moment, I wasn't just his aunt. I was a woman who had lived, and he was a man trying to understand how to do the same. When my sister's car finally pulled into the driveway, the spell broke gently. We stood up, the ordinary world returning around us. But I knew something had shifted. A line crossed, not into anything wrong, but into something deeper. A shared understanding. As I went to my room that night, I realized his question hadn't just been about him. It had stirred parts of me I thought were settled, and I wondered what else might come to the surface before this visit was over. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. I lay in bed, replaying our conversation over and over, remembering the way Daniel's eyes had searched mine, not for answers, but for understanding. It was a rare thing to be looked at like that, and I realized I hadn't been seen so openly in years. The next morning, I found him in the small sunroom, curled up in the wicker chair with a notebook on his lap. He looked up when I entered, startled, but there was no tension, only the kind of ease that comes from unspoken trust. "I was just writing," he said. "Thoughts, things I'm trying to figure out." I nodded, moving to sit across from him. The sun filtered through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the floor. I noticed again how much he'd grown, not just physically, but in presence, in the way he carried himself, quietly intentional, deliberate. "Do you ever write your thoughts?" he asked after a pause. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly letters I never send, or journal entries I read years later and wonder who that person was." He smiled faintly, and I could see a flicker of recognition in his eyes, like he understood the exact feeling I was describing. We sat together in a kind of companionable silence, broken only by the occasional chirp of a bird outside. Finally, he spoke. "Aunt Claire, yesterday, when I asked about regret, I think I was trying to see if it was okay to admit I don't have everything figured out. If it's okay to be vulnerable." I reached across the small table and brushed my hand over his notebook, a simple, grounding gesture. "It's more than okay," I said. "It's necessary. And the fact that you can admit it, it tells me you're stronger than you realize." He nodded slowly, absorbing the words, and for a moment we just sat there, two people quietly holding space for each other. The air between us felt alive, charged with trust and mutual respect. It was intimate in a way that didn't need labels or definitions, just understanding. When we finally stood, the morning sun had shifted higher in the sky, and the world outside the window seemed sharper, brighter, clearer. Walking into the kitchen for breakfast, I felt a deep connection I hadn't expected, a sense of discovery not just about him, but about myself. That day, as we moved through the house and garden, talking, laughing, and sharing small details of our lives, I realized that what started as a simple question had become a turning point, a quiet awakening, a reminder that even in the middle of life, even when you think the story is written, there are moments that redefine everything. And I had the feeling that the weekend was far from over. The last evening of my visit came with a softness that felt almost sacred. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across my sister's backyard. Daniel and I had spent the day walking along the edge of her garden, sipping iced tea, sharing memories that were both light and heavy, childhood stories, life lessons, regrets, little victories. There was a rhythm to our conversation, a trust that had grown steadily since his unexpected question. As we settled back onto the porch swing, the cool evening air brushing against our arms, Daniel turned toward me with a quiet seriousness. "Aunt Claire, I've been thinking a lot about what you said yesterday," he began. "About sitting with the questions, about not needing to have everything figured out." I smiled, gently, feeling the familiar tug in my chest. "I'm glad," I said. "It's the only way we really grow." He nodded, hesitating, then spoke in a softer tone, one that carried a weight I wasn't used to hearing from him. "You know, I think talking with you, it's helped me understand myself better, and maybe even appreciate the life I have more." I felt my throat tighten slightly, not from sadness, but from the depth of connection we had built. "I feel the same way," I admitted. "Sometimes it takes someone else's honesty to remind us of our own." For a long moment, we just sat, letting the evening stretch around us. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle, and the sky was painted in pinks and purples, the kind of colors that make everything else fade. I realized how rare it is to experience a conversation so unguarded, so deeply human, without fear or pretense. Finally, he spoke again, lighter this time. "I guess. Thank you for being honest with me, for not treating me like a kid anymore." "And thank you," I said, "for asking a question I wasn't ready for, but that I needed to hear too." We shared a quiet laugh, and it felt like the culmination of a journey neither of us had expected to take. There was respect, warmth, and a profound understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. When it was time for me to leave the next morning, we hugged, holding on a little longer than usual. Not in a way that was awkward or forced, but in a way that conveyed everything words couldn't: gratitude, trust, and recognition of shared growth. Driving away, I thought about the question that had started it all, about regret, about life choices, about the courage to be vulnerable. It had been unexpected, yes, but it had opened the door to one of the most meaningful conversations I'd had in years. And I realized that life, no matter how long we've lived, always has a way of surprising us. Sometimes through the people we thought we knew best, sometimes through questions we never imagined hearing. What matters is that we listen, truly listen, and let those moments change us. By the time I reached home, the experience had settled deep inside me, a quiet reminder that connection, honesty, and trust aren't bound by age. They only require a willingness to be present. That weekend, that question, and that conversation with my sister's son had left a mark, one that would stay with me for a lifetime. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fully seen, fully alive, and fully ready to embrace whatever questions life might throw my way next.